Hi there. Thank you for your interest and research on stakeholder engagement. In this video, we, the guest editors of a Business and Society special issue on this topic, provide you with a brief introduction into this topic by advancing an understanding of what is stakeholder engagement, elaborating on why it is relevant, and sketching potential directions for future research on this topic.
Stakeholder engagement refers to the process of symbolically or substantively involving stakeholders within organizational activities in which they are interested or by which they are affected. This process may become manifested in different ways. For example, organizations and their representatives may invite stakeholders to contribute to organizational activities. In part, we observe such processes, for instance, of open innovation or open strategy, where greater stakeholders such as consumers or business partners contribute to innovation processes or strategy making. Conversely, stakeholders may also engage themselves as individuals or representatives of social actors, such as non-governmental organizations. Such forms of unsolicited stakeholder engagement may be performed, among others, through activism or social movements, which may affect broader economic and societal outcomes. Hence, stakeholder engagement may manifest itself on and partly even spans individual, organizational, and societal levels of analysis.
One way to unpack the complexity of stakeholder engagement is to focus attention on different dimensions of the process, namely stakeholder participation, inclusion, and democracy. Stakeholder participation relates to provision of input by stakeholders to an organization's programs, policies, and strategies. For example, through feedback seeking, activism, and counter-hegemonic discourses. Given its manifold manifestations, stakeholder participation foregrounds the how questions, such as how do stakeholders participate and thus become engaged in organizational activities. Stakeholder inclusion refers to giving voice to stakeholders through the co-creation of an organization's issues, priorities, and procedures, for example, by fostering dialogues based on a shared sense of belonging. These dynamics primarily back the who questions, such as who is included in organizational activities and who isn't. Stakeholder democracy, finally, involves the why questions, such as why do stakeholders partly have the right to be handed some degree of formal decision-making power, for example, through direct consensus, deliberative, or radical democracy? Democratic governance structures increasingly find their way into contemporary organizations, such as collectives or cooperatives.
Stakeholder engagement remains an underrepresented and underdeveloped field in business and society research, in particular, and management research more generally. We argue that the stakeholder engagement deserves to be examined more systematically and in greater depth for several reasons. Empirically, stakeholder engagement is an important contemporary phenomenon. Nowadays, the corporate social responsibility agenda is being pressured by a devastating pandemic, increasing inequalities, and fake news discourses. In the face of an ever-increasing plethora of tools for engaging stakeholders in organizational process, stakeholders are increasingly engaged in activities such as strategy making, product development, work coordination, and corporate social responsibility initiatives. We argue that in order to learn about how to tackle the grand societal challenge of our time, we need a deeper understanding of stakeholder engagement. Theoretically, stakeholder engagement remains a systematic blind spot in management research. Especially, mainstream management research continues to reproduce a managerialist bias by implicitly foregrounding organization elites as decision makers who act in the best interest of all stakeholders. Research on stakeholder engagement enable us to challenge the limits of this taken for granted assumption. This then offers to strike new grounds for a research agenda on the enables, dynamics, and outcomes of stakeholder engagement.
The special issue on stakeholder engagement welcomes submissions that unpack the enablers, dynamics and outcomes of this process on any or even across multiple levels of analysis. This fascinating research area invites not only conceptual but also empirical work in all of its facets, including qualitative, quantitative, configurational and experimental research designs, among others. In order to gain a better understanding of stakeholder engagement, a lot remains to be done. And some of the questions that deserve to be examined are: what are the mechanisms, practices, tactics and strategies through which stakeholder engagement is performed in and around organizations? How do actors work through the tensions that arise in stakeholder engagement? Which stakeholders get engaged in organizational activities? Who does not get engaged, and why? Which individual, organizational or societal factors and conditions enable, constrain or disable effective stakeholder engagement? Which outcomes, both desirable and problematic, both expected and unexpected, does stakeholder engagement produce? And finally, how does stakeholder engagement vary across different types of firms, such as small and medium-sized enterprises versus multinational corporations, or social ventures versus for-profit corporations? And why is this so?
We hope that stakeholder engagement as a theme of the Business and Society special issue resonates with your interests. The deadline for submissions is January 31st in 2022. Please do not hesitate to contact any of the guest editors if you have questions about the special issue. We look forward to receiving your submissions.